minutes for everybody to start joining. I hope you guys can see me and hear me well. Just mic testing. Costa, maybe you can give me a thumbs up meanwhile. All right, thanks. Welcome to Coffee with MBA&Beyond, everyone. We're just waiting on a couple of more, maybe a minute more for everybody to start joining. I'm Paridhi, co-founder of MBA&Beyond, here with two awesome speakers with us tonight to address all the queries that you guys have shared with us, and you might have more. So I'll walk you through how the whole session is going to look like. The first 20 minutes, we're going to be tackling some of the most critical questions that have come through to us. Lauren and Kaustubh, they're just going to be introducing themselves in a little bit. They're going to be helping you tackle those questions. And then after that, or through the session, feel free to drop your questions in the chat section, or feel free to just raise your hand. We are happy to have you unmute yourself and go on camera and ask your questions. Since this is a very intimate session, we really invite all our audience to be on camera if you like to, and also raise your hands as we go with the flow. We've got two amazing consultants with us tonight, Kaustubh and Lauren. We're going to be dropping in the links to their profile here as they introduce themselves. And we do this week on week. We come together with the most insightful, the most knowledgeable folks from the industry together with you to answer all the questions. So do not hesitate, and whatever question pops up in your head, please park them in the chat section or raise your hands. Very excited to start the session with both of you, Kaustubh and Lauren. Why don't we start with your introductions first? Over to you, Lauren.
All right. Well, what information would you like to get from me? I mean, I can definitely start my name, but if I'm missing anything, just let me know. But I'm Lauren. Hi, I'm a graduate of UCLA Anderson, class of 2021. Discovered my passion for coaching actually a long time ago doing tutoring, but in the last few years really realized that since I graduated my own MBA and really loved my experience, that I wanted to help others also reach their goals. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Did you want to say should I say my fun fact, Heidi?
Oh, of course, I would love to, and I'm sure people are waiting on that. So anything and everything.
My fun fact, I actually technically won an Emmy. And I'm not an actor or anything that cool, but I actually worked for the Olympics. And back in the day when I was working for the Olympics, because our team won one of the best productions, I won an Emmy. So technically I'm an Emmy winner, which means I'm only 3 away from an EGOT.
Woo-hoo! That's amazing. So Lauren, this is interesting. And what I am now curious, what was your drive to go for an MBA?
So yeah, my drive at the time, I wasn't really sure. I actually thought I would never do an MBA or master's, to be fair, but I wasn't moving up my career fast enough. And, my whole team, like my bosses, they were all MBA. And so I was like, all right, to reach where they are, I need to get an MBA. And I mean, the irony is I don't even work in entertainment anymore, but I think it was the catalyst for it. And I think beyond just, getting into a career, right? I think there's so much you learn about yourself during MBA. And again, that's kind of my passion for helping people. Even with application, I think there's so much you can learn about yourself. And it's a very transformative journey just getting there. And of course, once you get your MBA and where your life goes, it's fascinating. I love it. And I'm happy to be here today for that reason.
Thanks for joining us today, Lauren. We are really looking forward to all the insights that you might have to share with everyone. Over to you, Kaustubh. Really excited to hear about your journey, what you do, and yes, help us understand your background. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paridhi. So, hi everyone. I'm actually working at Amazon as a senior product manager right now, and I'm based in Munich, and I will do global experiments to improve the CX for customers. Specifically speaking, if you have been to the detail page where you can see all the product information, I make changes there to make shopping better for you guys. At least that's what I tell everyone. Before that, I graduated from NCR last year. So I'm a 22J. And yeah, it was a very fun time. I enjoyed my time there, traveled a lot. I think that's what the MBA was an excuse for. And before my MBA, I've been in fintech for a few years. I was working in strategy and analytics roles, a bit in Singapore, a bit in India. And yeah, before that, I also started my own company. Also a very fun time. So that's my professional experience. And then with respect to an MBA, I'll also talk a little bit about how I ended up doing one. And similar to what Lauren mentioned, I honestly had never thought I would do one. It was so my flatmate at that point in time in Singapore was doing his MBA from NCR. was actually a really good friend, and then he mentioned, no, you should do an MBA. I was like, really? And then that's how all the conversation started. So honestly, I went through a very confusing phase myself with respect to should I do an MBA or not, and what should I look to gain from it, and so on. So I feel that like working with Shantanu at that point in time was super helpful, and it clarified a lot of questions for me. And then I think right now my goal with consulting is to do similar things for other folks, like people who are confused about what they want to do around whether they should go an MBA or not. Like it's just, I think it's super helpful for them to talk to somebody who's done it and who's seen what life looks like after the MBA. So that's kind of my goal. And the last thing, fun fact.
Yeah. Yeah, we're waiting on that. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So I think my fun fact is I've actually cycled around the circumference of a country. And it sounds way more impressive than it is because this was actually in Singapore. So that
Oh,
was,
wow. Okay.
yeah, I know that's disappointing. That's probably like 130 kilometers or something. But yeah, it's more impressive when I put it as that.
Of course, when you put it, you do not talk about the kilometers. And then I think, don't let them know.
Absolutely.
But this is great. Did you talk about it in your INSEAD application as well, Costume?
I
When
think so, yes.
yeah. Okay, of course. So when you say that, and this is just like, and of course, just out of curiosity, when you said like it was because of a friend who was doing an MBA and that you got motivated and the whole conversation started, how long did it actually take you to materialize from that first, conception of a thought to eventually get into a B school?
It was probably an year and a half, couple of years. So my friend was a 20J. So for the folks on the call who don't know what that means, INSEAD has this terminology which names the batch who graduates now. So 20J are the people who graduated in June or July of 2020. And they had actually started a year back in August or September of 2019. I am a 22J. So I graduated in like 2022 June. So yeah, so that he graduated a couple of years before me. So maybe I think it was 1.5 to 2 years from this taking this conversation from conception to actually joining. Also,
Got
COVID did not make that decision easy.
Of course, I'm sure. So now that we're talking, and I actually like how organically the conversation is turning into something more meaningful for our audience. So, Kaustubh, you talked about 1 to 1.5 years from the conception of the thought. Am I right? That includes the whole application and your preparation for a GMAT, GRE, and everything included?
Not really. So that was probably only 2 to 3 months because well, again, because of the confusion that I talked about,
Mm-hmm.
had never really actually started like pursuing this whole process. Maybe until June, no, actually even later, probably July of 2021. Yes, 2021. So after that, I actually was around to applicant myself for NCR. So the deadline was sometime around right now, like around November. And yeah, I had like 2, 3 months, and it was a bit rushed to be honest. Fortunately, I was only applying to one school, so that helped.
Of course. Lauren, what was your story? Did you apply to a bunch of schools, or you clearly know that you wanted to go to Anderson and you took all your energy put into that one big basket? So what about you? Curious.
Yeah, so I actually, yeah, because I knew, so again, my background's entertainment, and because I thought I was going to work in entertainment forever, I actually just set my eyes on Anderson, and then like I wanted to do Marshall was like I was like I'll maybe do round 3, right? Like those are the 2 best schools in my, well, Stern also, but I had no desire to go to New York. No offense to New Yorker lovers, but I basically decided I was like I want to stay in LA, and so I'll look at these 2 programs. If I get into Anderson, then I'm good. I need to do more. But with that being said, I won't say regret because I don't really want to live with regret, right? And I'm happy where I am. With that being said, I'm looking back at my score and my profile. I was like, and now that I work with a lot of clients, I'm like, I probably could have like gone to a higher school rank, just been a little bit more prestige. But I have no regrets. I had a great experience, and I think things happen exactly as they should. But I would encourage in general, like apply a bit more schools, right? Like again, I don't regret, but I kind of look back like, what have I just tried? What have I just tried for these schools? And you never know, like try for those dream schools, basically.
So Now, this brings me to a question to both of you, and we can tackle Mayank's question soon after that. And then we'll go to the bunch of questions, list of questions that we have, as much as we can tackle. And guys, please feel free to drop in your questions as they are coming through to you, because we're just candidly having conversation here, where you could find any meaning and any, like there could be hints and you want to ask us, this is all about you. So when you guys pick schools, were you aligning the school with respect to your post MBA goals, or it was just the idea of going to a certain geography or a certain school or a certain name in the industry for a certain thing, or maybe just the ranking? How were you guys going about it? And really curious to hear both your thoughts, because of course, people come from different schools of thoughts, and I'm very curious to understand from both of you.
I'll go first. So for me, I think there's so many factors. I think that was a really great question. You phrased it like there's so many factors here, right? So I think for me, like one thing, you always want to think just in general, the fit, like does it fit your life and your lifestyle and what you want? Again, I really knew I wanted to do entertainment. So I knew that like to continue doing entertainment, I was already living in Los Angeles, to be fair, but like to continue doing that, I should really focus on a school in LA or a school in general that's going to be good for entertainment, again, which was LA and New York. So I cut down New York because I knew I didn't love New York. And then I was like, LA, let's look at the schools that really fit, right? And yes, I definitely considered prestige. I come from an Asian family. If I went to anything less than a top 25, I think my mom would be like, why are you wasting money? So I definitely did look into the top programs. And so also actually I considered like part-time programs as well. So I also had some personal, I was in a relationship at the time. So I also needed to consider that. So I definitely think, in the end of the day, choose a school that's right fit for you, right? Like all those circumstances do matter. I think it tends to happen, and with my clients, and I do work with a majority Asian clients, a lot of us do just focus on the best school possible, but you need to consider the industry you want to go into. You want to consider like the area, like honestly, like LA has some of the best weather, and I didn't want to leave my beautiful sunny weather. So that is factors that you all consider in the end of the day.
Absolutely. Kaustubh, how about you? Why did you only pick INSEAD? Because you only applied to INSEAD.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, to echo what Lauren said, I think she made some great points. And I think even for me, it was a mix of professional as well as personal reasons. So on the professional side, I kind of was based in Singapore before the MBA, and then I wanted to continue in Singapore. So then INSEAD made the most sense since I was already based there. Also, I think that was the obvious part. The part that was not so obvious from my professional side was that I had been a part of the tech industry and had always wanted to be a part of one. And then everyone was like, then you should go to the US. But then I was like, on a personal basis, I am not very keen to go to the US because it's very far from India, and then the travel and then everything else did not make sense to me. So that was a purely personal call. So then after weighing so many of these things, I was like, INSEAD makes the most sense from a geography perspective. And then from a tech perspective, like Singapore has a lot of decent options. Europe also had a lot of decent options. So I was like, let me go for it and then figure out in 1 year. But yeah, it was a mix of many things.
So and this is a question that comes through to me from a lot of Asians, Lauren, like you mentioned, because a lot of people from China, Hong Kong, India, we work with a lot of clients from Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan. They're all trying to, of course, switch geographies. And one of the biggest factors that plays an important and a key role there is the work visa situation. I know we did not plan it as we are talking about it, but I see most of the audience is coming from India with us today. So I thought maybe let's touch upon this topic, and maybe if you guys can bring in some insight. So was that a consideration for both of you, considering that both of you were already outside of your, native lands, motherlands? So what was that a point to consider as well when you were picking a geography for a particular school that you picked?
So actually I'm from the States, and I actually went to school in the States. So in that case, it didn't apply to me. But with that being said, I can speak about how it does, I think, affect my classmates. I definitely saw how it was really challenging, especially depending on your ethnicity. Unfortunately, the US does do, like, again, I'll speak on a US perspective. I think the US is right now in general a little bit tougher, especially if you're from one of the countries with the high demand of visa, right? So like right now, actually, I do work with a client. Her whole goal is to just relocate. She's like, I actually don't mind the ranking. I just want to relocate. So the thing I would say is, when you're looking at that, definitely for the US, take a note of the STEM designation. A lot of schools are really now proud to like really get international students that way, right? Like you do 3 extra years instead of the 1 year visa, you get 3 years instead. So I do encourage you, if you're looking at that and you want to stay in the US specifically, to look into programs like that. All the top 25 are pretty much there, but there's actually a few other schools that are maybe not in the top 25 that still qualify. So I think that's something you're looking for, your primary goal, then definitely look into that. But yeah, in regards to like geolocation in general, like as I've worked with more clients, I've learned, really choose a location where you want to try to end up in, right? Like even if your chances are a little bit hard in the US, but if you want to, again, go for a STEM program and go for it. If you like Europe, which a lot of people love Europe and want to live there, obviously go for a European program. But it is difficult, unfortunately. It's just difficult. But I've actually heard, random story, Australia actually has a lot of openings right now and does a lot of immigration. So if you're like, I just want to get out location and still get a pretty good higher education, like MBA, Australia right now is really hot for that. So just an idea.
No, absolutely. Canada as well. That's what I hear. While of course US right now, the situation is a little tricky. Kaustubh, how about you? What was your was it also a parameter or a factor that you were looking at when you were looking at geographies? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I think actually there's a couple of factors. One is the visa, but then obviously there is the language too, and both of them play a huge role when it comes to thinking about Europe. Personally, what ended up happening for me was, like, before the MBA, I was very keen to, as I mentioned, like I was based in Singapore and then I wanted to work in Singapore again. But then the reason I decided against that post the MBA is that the situation had changed a lot in a couple of years from a visa perspective. So the government had like changed some policies because they were not as favorable when it came to immigration. So then I decided maybe being there did not make sense, and then I ended up choosing Europe. Uh, Now again in Europe, I am actually based in Munich, and since I'm at Amazon, like it's just the language of communication is English all through, so it doesn't matter. But if I look at my other friends who are based in Germany, pretty much everyone knows German. So, and that's going to be the case for most markets in Europe. Like if you're in France, you probably need friends. If you're in Spain, you probably need Spanish and so on. So that's one thing. And then on the second side, again, visa, as I mentioned, like every market has its own conditions. And it does make sense to investigate that before taking a decision on what market you want to work in. Because if not, then first it might be hard getting a visa. And second, even if it's not very hard, then it might restrict some choices in terms of jobs you have. Like in some markets, they might favor some industries where it's easier to get a visa and so on. So it's a fairly complicated discussion. And yeah, I mean, for anyone who wants to explore, it's always better to investigate.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. I'm just going to take a quick minute to help our audience understand when we're talking about school selection. And this, what you see on your screen right now, is our portal Mirror. And this is a journey that all our candidates, when they start working with the consultants at MBA&Beyond, they have to take. Where I just want to point out that the school selection actually happens on step 6. It's not where you start your journey. It happens much later, after you've introspected, after you've answered the questions that Lauren and Kaustubh just briefly touched upon, which includes what is your personal situation, what are you really looking for with respect to post MBA goals. Does the geography will do you good with respect to the job opportunities, the options that you have available in that geography? Because trust me, the proximity of the school to the job options really makes a big difference. MBA is a lot about networking, peer-to-peer learning, and they are going to be definitely helping you with the references. So you're going to get coffees and wines and drinks with people who are eventually going to help you. So you might as well be in a geography where you are going to be benefited for what you really want to do post MBA. So a lot of other factors here before you even jump onto thinking about what school selection is. I'm not going to go in detail, but I'm going to help you understand if you're in a phase and you're thinking round two, you should already be considering thinking about your goals, about your strengths, achievements, weaknesses, failures, international exposure, if you have any. Especially, I see a bunch of questions coming in for INSEAD. INSEAD really values international exposure. We will touch upon that in a bit briefly. And your extracurriculars, if what good have you done to the community? Why do you need an MBA? Why a particular school? So this is a lot of thinking you need to do before you jump on working on your essays. I'm going to be stop like sharing my screen, and let's tackle a few questions that we have on the screen. So Mayank asks, there's a question for you, Kaustubh. How many years of work experience you had, and how much was your GMAT score?
Yeah, sure. So on the work experience side, when I applied, it was somewhere between 4.5 years. So that means when I ended up joining, it was like somewhere between 5.5. So probably around what the average is for NCR. So yeah, nothing out of the blue there. In terms of GMAT, actually, I did not have a GMAT. I had a GRE score. I was super fortunate because a couple of years before I applied for the MBA, actually even maybe 4 years before I applied for the MBA, I had considered doing my MS in the US. So I'd given the GRE. So I already had that score, did not fortunately have to give it again. That score was 334. Like if you want the split between verbal and cont, it was 164 in verbal and 170 in cont. Hope that helps, man.
Thanks, Kaustubh. And the next question is again for you. What are your thoughts on INSEAD France versus INSEAD Singapore in perspective of courses as well as opportunities for Indians? I know that comes through to us almost all the time, but Kaustubh, I'd love for you to tackle this. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, hi, Vikas. So, first of all, fortunately, in NCR, there's no strong distinction between both the campuses. So, what you actually have to choose when you're applying is something called as your home campus. And you end up spending, so there's a total of 5 periods, like P1 to P5, each for 2 months. And you end up spending the first 2 periods in your home campus. And after that, for the rest of the 3 periods, it's actually pretty flexible. So you can spend them either at your home campus or you can actually bid for something called as an exchange to the other campus. And when we also talk about recruitment, it's actually the same for both campuses. So it's not like recruiters distinguish between one campus or the other. Now, the way I will put it, P4 is when P4 or even P5, the last couple of periods is when the majority of recruitment activity happens. So for it's super important for you to be based in the geography where you are going to be recruiting in those last 2 periods. Other than that, for the first 3 periods, it doesn't really matter. So I would say that it should probably be a personal decision rather than anything. Like I've heard of a lot of people saying that maybe they wanted to recruit in Singapore, but then they wanted to travel around in Europe. So they started in France, spent the first 3 periods there, like traveled a lot, and then after that for recruitment ended up going to Singapore and vice versa. So I think it's about a more nuanced decision. So I think you are fine starting off in either of those campuses.
Yeah. One thing I do here, Kaustubh, is that the campus, the geography where you want to be hired is where you should end. I think your INSEAD chapter. So
Exactly.
yeah, so if you're looking to be recruited in Singapore, then look at Singapore, maybe finishing in Singapore. And if you're looking to move to Europe, then maybe you want to finish in Europe. So,
Absolutely.
all right. So before we jump onto Mayank's question, we're going to tackle two questions since I understand most of the candidates are right now struggling and tackling round two. And they do and always have questions around, is there a distinction between rounds? Should I push for round two? For most of the applications, wait for round three, so on and so forth. So I'll just put out a few questions out there, and Kaustubh, Lauren, your insights will be really valuable. One of the questions is, how do round two MBA applications differ from other rounds? And what are the key benefits and considerations that an applicant should take into account when they're working on round two?
Right. I actually really love this question because it is very relevant, especially for international students. So, I think in general, like the first thing to note is there's some programs that will take international for round 3 and 4 and whatever. However, I always strongly recommend my clients stick with round 1 and 2. So the thing is, what makes round 2 interesting is that, it's the round most people apply to. It is extremely competitive. Like round 1's competitive in a different way, but round 2, you definitely compete with everyone else who, like most of the group. So I think it really takes a lot to stand out in that round. And so, yeah, really making those essays as strong as possible. And like, if you're going to take that time to do round 2, in my opinion, hopefully you have about higher GMAT or GRE score, right? Like that's usually the reason people delay, by the way, I realize, is the test scores. Because if you have the opportunity, I would definitely encourage round 1. Round 1, besides being just a little bit more likely percent wise, and especially for international students, like for example, last I checked, INSEAD actually, they have a certain quota, like we can only take 5% from each school, whatever, right? And once they fill that quota based on rounds, they don't fill more. So that is, a clear example where like you got to be a little bit more on the first few batches versus the last few batches. But besides, your chances, you also get, especially in the US, you have more opportunities for scholarship. They do tend to give out more money during round 1. So I think round 2 is a very challenging one. But with that being said, if you're like, I want to go this year and that's my goal, and I worked, I needed that extra time to bring up my GMAT score, then go for it. Just really work on those stories because it is a lot more competitive. You really need to stand out. And just like another note for as a coach and consultant for this, it is a very stressful time because a lot of us in the States are celebrating holidays. So just keep that in mind. Like it's a very stressful time for like a lot of, I don't think India celebrates Christmas as much, and you guys definitely don't have Thanksgiving, but in the States, it's a very stressful time. So time goes by fast. So just be very on it with your time and realize that you got to be on top of it.
All right. Yeah, Kaustubh.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agreed with Lauren. I think round 1 is a little bit safer than round 2, so it is always better to go with that. But I would also say that there's not like a massive difference between R1 and R2. So I think when people ask me like comparing between a great application in R2 versus a not so great application in R1, I would say go with the great application in R2. That does increase your chances a little bit more. I think round 3 is when things start getting more tricky, and that you should not apply to unless like you're absolutely clear that you want to apply for this year. So yeah, I think round 2 it's not too bad, but yeah, higher scores is better. Uh, Typically also I think since it gives you a little bit more time to think about your content in terms of the essays that you're writing and then also probably the test scores. The goal should be to best utilize that extra couple of months that you have compared to R1. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with what both of you just said. I'll just touch upon one more thing, that you need to understand what candidacy are you bringing to the table to a business school. So if you belong to a completely underrepresented pool of candidates, for example, if you're a veteran, if you're a fashion model working, in a recycle, upcycle fashion industry, also, running your own startup, you fairly belong to an underrepresented pool, and this is a very unique profile. You can leverage an opportunity to apply in later rounds. But if you belong to an overrepresented pool, and as we talk about Asians being very overrepresented in business schools when it comes to China, India, we need to be mindful of the rounds, and the earlier you apply, the better. So for some of the US schools, you will also see if you are late this year, you could also consider an opportunity to apply to early action rounds. Some of the schools do offer that, or round 1, instead of, really doing a half-baked application for round 3. If you feel you're prepared for round 2, we still have time for some of the schools. For INSEAD, of course, the ship has already sailed, and we do not advise you, if you belong to an overrepresented Indian male engineer pool, for example, to apply in round 3 for INSEAD. Sorry for putting it out there, but that's the fact. We've not seen very much successful or, success stories coming through. While if you're a female, we can still look into what profile are you bringing to the table, because lately we've observed, of course, business schools are trying to balance it out, the equation, when it comes to the number of females they want to admit in their class. And we have seen some really strong women profiles getting through in later rounds as well. So understand what candidature you're bringing to the table. We can now maybe we tackle Mayank's next question, and then we'll go back to the bunch of questions that we have. So Mayank's asking, Kaustubh, again, I think this is for you and me. Can we throw some light on Singapore schools, INSEAD, NUS, NTU, for Indian male candidate with a 720 GMAT, 12.5 years of work experience, and 1.5 years of career break at present? Kaustubh, do you want to tackle this one first?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with the GMAT. So I think 720 GMAT is a decent score. Like I wouldn't call it amazing, but it's not bad either. So maybe par for course. Uh, like I can talk about, let's say, INSEAD's average score, that's somewhere around 710. But that's the overall global average. I would say that for Indians, it's probably in the range of 730, maybe Indian males even higher at 740. So I would say that it's not bad, but it's not ideal either. On the other hand, even 12.5 years of experience is a bit on the higher side. So that's typically not a concern, but it's still on the higher side. So which means that your stories really need to stand out with respect to the justification of why you want to do an MBA. Similar with respect to the career break. So I think most European schools specifically are a lot more forgiving when it comes to career breaks. But the same thing, like you have to be able to justify that. And I mean, honestly, between all three options, right? INSEAD, MUS, and TU. By the way, MUS and TU, the average work experience is also a little bit lower than INSEAD. So that's also one more factor to consider. But honestly, I don't think I can give you like an easy answer right now. And this probably needs a longer discussion to understand the rest of your profile and then give you a more holistic answer.
Yeah, absolutely, Mayank. I'd love to have so I'm going to be sending out an email to all of you after this. If you want to get on a call, happy to have a detailed discussion, because so it's all possible to make it to all the schools that you want to, as long as you know why you want to go for an MBA at a certain point in time in life. It could be, at any age, to be honest. It's up to you. What is your purpose with an MBA? What I can tell you is that, like I said, it's a lot of peer-to-peer learning. So you may want to go to a school which has a little higher average years of experience. So you are getting to learn from, you do not want to go to a school which has just 3 to 4 years of experience. So when you're picking schools, NUS, you will see the average years of experience might be just 3 to 4 years. So it's also going to be what you're aspiring to get from a business school, and what's the class profile that, in general, with respect to number of years of experience, it looks like. But of course, there's more to this story. I need to understand more. We can get on a call and see what do you really expect to achieve out of an MBA. We have okay, another question that you've asked: well, who are the consultants who work with higher experience oil and gas candidates, especially for Singapore schools? So there are a bunch of them. All our consultants, including Lauren and Kaustubh, are well equipped. We work with a lot of older candidates, especially candidates coming from government jobs, veteran communities. Also, in your case, we've worked with somebody from oil and gas who just landed himself at IMD, because IMD again has average number of years of experience is much higher. So we can have a conversation around that and see who could be a potential match for you. Happy to do that for you personally. So now, since we do not have any more questions here, I can go back to the list of questions that we have. How should applicants identify and address weaknesses in their applications, particularly when faced with red flags? Before we jump onto the weaknesses question, I want to address this challenging point that Mayank has raised about career breaks. And Kaustubh said, as long as you're able to justify why you took a break, it's all okay. We have had candidates who've taken breaks, but again, you cannot not be doing anything in that break. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to be saying that, but yeah, I mean, you could be doing something for your own, like self-development or something. And maybe like Kaustubh, Lauren, do you have any examples of friends who joined your B schools who have taken like a longish career breaks? If you want to exemplify something, otherwise I will bring a few examples.
Yeah, I don't have necessarily a friend maybe, but one of my clients actually right now, he's been taking he got laid off, part of the Google layoffs, and like he's looking at jobs, but he also said is like what are the things he want to pursue. He talked to me about it. And like, I think it's great because like the three things he kind of wants to do, he said it was like, I want to learn how to code, because he said in his old role he didn't have time to actually learn that, but he wanted to, use it. He's he's in Google, so obviously working with engineers, but at points he didn't know the technical skills. Another thing he did was actually travel. I think right now, actually, what's really, because of COVID and everything, using travel as an excuse is completely valid right now, right? It's like, I use that year to really catch up on all the traveling and take advantage of the fact that I didn't have that. It's a really good one. And if you twist it to how it's not just about having fun, but about learning about yourself and cultures, completely valid. And then the third one he did was like, he is tutoring / mentoring with GMAT. He did pretty well in GMAT. He's like, I want to give back. And I'm like, those are three awesome things to do, So and actually another client, she actually got married and also kind of took a little bit of time off for that, right? So she said, I'm using it as a reset. In the meantime, I've worked on these classes and courses online. At least doing, as Pradi was saying, at least being productive in some way is important here.
Absolutely. And I think you put it really well, Lauren. Kaustubh, do you have any example that you'd like to share?
Yeah, similar actually. So I'm thinking of people in my batch and then one of my clients too. So one, like a few people from my batch who came from Israel actually had a long break for travel. So it's actually a very common culture there where, let's say, post their like 6 months or maybe a couple of years of mandatory army training, they end up traveling for 6 months.
Yeah.
So that actually was justified by everyone, and that was totally fine with the AdCom clearly. One more example I can think of is an Indian female actually, and then she had taken a career break because she had a kid. And then that was probably a year-long break where, again, she was looking after the baby and then focusing more on family. And she put
Yeah.
it that way, and then they were fine with that. Then one more example I can think of is another person who was actually working on a startup. Like it wasn't a very concrete idea, but then they also realized that it's really hard for them to like do this while at it in a job. So then they just kind of quit one day and then decided to figure it out. Things didn't work out, and then they ended up like joining a job back again in probably like half an year to a year, somewhere between maybe 8-10 months. And then they justified it that way, that they explored a startup, talked to a lot of people. So it was also helpful for them professionally because irrespective of everything, they end up learning a lot, networking a lot. And so on. So I think, as you said, as long as you're doing something, as long as like not working has a clear goal and intention behind it, it's totally fine.
Absolutely. I'd just like to say that sometimes we undermine the importance of a career break. I mean, sometimes, of course, it is unfortunate that it's not in our control, but sometimes candidates or people do take career breaks by choice. Sometimes it's to take care of a certain family member. Sometimes it's just to give back to yourself, some thinking time for clarity, for vision, and whatever. Business schools really and absolutely respect that. Because they do want to mold you into very clear thinking global business leaders who are going to be solving a real world problem. So I'm going to give you two examples. I know enough has been shared already right now, but this is like something I really look up to. This candidate, Neeru, who's just gotten accepted at INSEAD, and she worked with Dubai in like a government opportunity, like she was in insurance or something, but she was really not finding a lot of meaning into the kind of job that she was doing. And she took a very long career break, I think good 10 months, where first 2 to 3 months she just traveled, wrote a little bit of a book which she couldn't complete. But the second half of her career break, she actually went to Africa to build libraries for the kids in one of the villages. So it was a very enriching, and a lot of value came to the application from that, because for her the whole experience was a lot eye opener from where she was coming from, and it exposed her to the space where she understood that she wanted to work more on the humanitarian side of things. So you should use this as an opportunity that is adding some meaning to your life, definitely. And or let's say if there is an unfortunate situation for one of our candidates, had to quit his job from Mumbai and be in Delhi through the pandemic to be with the parents. That could also happen, and business schools understand that. And he's now at Duke Fuqua. The business school was very happy to accommodate and understand that there was a 1 year career break in such a situation. All right. I hope that answered your question also, Mayank, if because I think you have a lot of examples now in front of you. So the next question, which we'll go back to, is about weaknesses. How should applicants identify and address weaknesses in their applications, particularly when faced with red flags? So, Costa, Lauren, thoughts on weaknesses. How can one identify? Costa, do you want to go for it? Yeah.
Yeah, sure, why not? So yeah, that's a difficult question because, well, it's always tricky when it comes to weaknesses. And I think there is this kind of trade-off between, first of all, being completely open about those weaknesses on one side, and then also understanding what weaknesses to talk about. So first, let me start with this. Why do these schools ask you about your weaknesses? The first thing is that they want to see how open you are with respect to understanding yourself. Like, do you introspect? Do you try and figure out who you are as a person? So that's where the openness with respect to weaknesses comes in. And then the second thing is to also figure out if you have actually taken some actions on top of that. Like, have you tried to work on your weaknesses? What have you done there? And have you then improved with respect to that weakness? So that's the primary goal. And yeah, that weakness could be anything, right? I typically try to classify weaknesses into like maybe one is a character weakness, and then the second is a knowledge weakness. So to give maybe an example, right? Like as a character weakness, you could say that I'm super lazy. That's not ideal to talk about. But as but as a knowledge weakness, you can say that maybe you're not great at prioritization. Maybe you're not good at thinking about, let's say, long-term strategy. All of these again are the reason I call them knowledge weaknesses is that you can learn about these things. Like you can talk to mentors, you can do courses online, you can read books, whatever, and then figure out how you can solve this weakness, work upon it, and then iterate and improve and so on. So ideally speaking, I think you should be talking about it from this knowledge weakness perspective, and then talking about how did you identify this weakness, and then what steps have you taken to at least, if not completely, partially address it. That's generally talking about weaknesses. With respect to red flags, that's a little bit more trickier, but I think over there, honesty also helps. Like be upfront with respect to that red flag, uh, and then talk about it in the application, and then again justify what happened. I honestly, I'm trying to think of what some red flags can be. Maybe like the big ones are, I don't know, maybe you having like a charge sheet or something. So, I mean, maybe as long as you didn't kill someone, I don't know. Other than that, I think the school should be fine with something like if it was a minor incident or something. Again, as long as you're open about it and as long as you can justify as to what happened there. Yeah, over to you, Lauren.
Yeah, Lauren, if you've got any thoughts. Yeah.
Right. I would, as first of all, to say, I think that Kasu, you hit a lot of like the key points I would have mentioned too. In the end, I think one key thing to remember is that, so sorry, my WhatsApp just went out. Sorry about that. But the main thing I've learned about business school, is that they're trying to make an empathetic leader, right? And the thing about being an empathetic leader, and that's a really big thing. I think it used to be about like being cutthroat, right? But now it's all about being empathetic, diverse, inclusive. And part of that is realizing that you're human, right? Is realizing that you're going to make mistakes. Like the best type of leader is that one that can acknowledge, like recognize their mistakes and continuously works on them. So with that being said, again, Katja, I think kind of hit on the nail. It's identifying that weakness and be able to vocalize like how you identify it, how you work on it, right? And another thing, by the way, and this is my personal thought from my own experiences, our weaknesses tend to be our strengths at the same time, right? Like my strength and my weakness is that I'm super passionate I get into things. That's also bad because sometimes I go overboard and go like too much into something, I overthink, right? So it is a lot about wording, right? Instead of saying, like, I think I use a great example. It says like, you're lazy. I'm not as initiative. I don't take initiative as much, right? Or the good side of being lazy is you're much more chill, right? You're very relaxed. Like you're able to take input maybe more. You're a little bit able to sit in the backseat driver. And that's kind of good sometimes when you're around other type A personalities. So it's how you frame it. It's how you identify it, how you continue to work on it. And kind of with the red flags thing, same thing, there's very, very little, I think, big red flags that will come out because the idea is that if you, like, even if you're a convict, right? If you go like, look, I've learned so much from this. And from my experience, this is why I want an MBA. if you can write a convincing story with that, you actually might get accepted. Like it might seem crazy as a convict, right? But again, maybe not kill anyone, but let's say like a minor thing, but if you can write about that, because again, that shows your human side. That shows that you're willing to grow and that you're willing to like be a leader that accepts your flaws. And that is so much more important than a leader who just thinks that they're perfect. And I think that's something, again, a lot of my Asian clients seem to not understand. I'm like, they're not looking for perfectionism, because that's impossible. And they actually will, that's a red flag when I think, is that you think that you're so good that you cannot, you don't need, that you can do everything. And instead, acknowledging where you're weak at and how you want to work on that, that's more important in my opinion.
How beautifully have you both put it together, to be honest. Like, I have nothing to add to this. The whole human aspect of the whole weakness part that you talked about, Lauren, is so beautiful. I think we need to write like a big article on this together. This is because like people talk a lot about strengths and achievements, and like it's easy for them to come through. But when it comes to weaknesses, it's hard. They cannot pick a weakness or a failure because either we are too ashamed to talk about it, or we are thinking that our schools are going to be judging us way too much, while we're not able to see the human aspect of it, that they're just trying to consider a leader who is also a human. Beautifully said. Okay, let's tackle Picasso's question. Do reapplicants face any disadvantages over first-time applicants? Costa, Lauren, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure, I can go. So again, this depends a lot by school. There are certain schools which say that they are not very reapplicant friendly. Like some schools in Europe say that. INSEAD is one of these schools. Uh, I think again it comes down to the same point that if you are reapplying, then your application should have a significant difference. Like you should be able to show that in like the interim period of your first and then the reapplication, have you introspected enough on what maybe went wrong, and then maybe have you also put in a lot more effort into personal growth, like in around learning as a person, maybe doing better at your job and so on. So if you can show that growth both on a personal and professional level, and then your application now stands out, and I think most schools are fine. Uh, but other than that, again, it depends. I think at a school level, like so some schools probably a bit more in the US are more reapplicant friendly. Like they don't bother too much if you have had a previous application. But some schools will actually vocally voice out that if you are reapplying, then you better have like a strong reason for that, and you better show us some significant growth.
Yeah, I think for on my end, I would say that, and I to be fair, I've worked a lot more US, I would say, than Europe, so I'm definitely have a little bit insight there. I do think that the US is more open to it. The US is very big about underdog stories, right? The comeback stories. We love stories in general, first of all, but I think we're very big about like knowing someone came back and like came back to win and whatever, right? So a lot of the schools in the US will have like actually like it's actually a requirement. It's not even a choice in a lot of cases. If you're reapplying, why are you reapplying? And it's not, again, not to like, it's not to discourage you, but it is to see like how much you've grown. Again, we're all big about underdog stories. So if you can show why you've grown, that's, I think, the most important thing. What did you do to improve? I actually sometimes encourage my clients to do it, especially if they just like, especially if my clients like, oh, I have 3-4 years of work experience, which is a little under the work experience average, right? I'm like, look, I think you should go for it, because worst comes to worst, you go as a reapplicant and you can talk about how in that year you got a lot of more work experience. You maybe improve your GMAT score. You can do other stuff. You can really focus and like show them, wow, you rejected me, but look how much more I came back with. And a lot of times, again, if you have lower work experience, that's probably one of the reasons, right? So it's like now you have more work experience and you also have a chance to improve. So I think that as long as you improve on it and can talk about that, that's the most important thing here.
Absolutely. Just talk about the delta, and if you have done an application in the past and it's only like a slight change that you're going to be talking about, might as well just do it along with the other applications that you're of course applying to for the first time. So take a shot. Yes, there are some schools that are more reapplication friendly versus the others, but in the past 2 years we have observed that even INSEAD and LBS have been entertaining a lot of reapplicants, which was a strict no-no a few years back. So do take your chance. See if you let's say had international experience missing earlier and you developed or you worked on that, INSEAD could be willing to entertain you for that. All right, then the last question right now from Mayank we've got a list of schools that are good for candidates with higher work ex. There are a few in Europe, not so many. I know you're looking at Singapore as a specific geography, where INSEAD is definitely one, which we know of for sure. Maybe Kostub can throw more light on that. However,
Yeah,
they're more in Europe, definitely compared to US. So if that is what you're really seeking, I believe you should be looking into more European business schools compared to any other part of the world. So yeah, Kostub, your thoughts on that?
yeah, agreed. So IMD is one that you named previously also. I think the average experience there is closer to somewhere between 8 to 10 years. So that's also a lot friendlier. I think as an older applicant, again, first of all, you need to be clear about what you aim to achieve from the MBA because your career path then might not look the same as a lot of younger people.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that you should be looking at. And other than that, I would say also look at a few other maybe executive programs. So especially if you're clear that you are in a particular industry and then want to continue and progress there, then looking at executive programs from different parts of the world might also be like a good idea. But very similar to what you said, I think these conversations are a bit more nuanced because then a lot of personal factors come into play. And yeah, Mayank, like if you want to talk to Paridhi, if you want to talk to me, please feel free to do that, and then we can have a more detailed conversation, taking into account all of your previous experience and your goals.
Absolutely. So when we're picking schools again, we like to, so executive MBA is definitely one option. There's a path that if any of you, apart from Mayank, could benefit from it, you should look into is MIT Sloan Fellow programs. So there's like a Sloan Fellow program, which has three different programs under it. So three different schools. One is MSX Stanford, where the average years of experience is 12 years. It is as good as an MBA, but it is for candidates who have as much experience as you have, Mayank. And it will serve you the purpose because you are actually going to the school. While it's not an executive MBA where you're kind of only doing it part-time, it is actually a full-time program. And it is in the heart of the Silicon Valley. The second is MIT Sloan Fellow MBA itself. Again, it's for older candidates. So you might want to explore. And the third one, I think with average 18 years of experience, is Masters in Management at LBS. It's also a part of the Sloan Fellow family. So you may want to look into this. Apart from this, I've heard like a couple of our older candidates also tend to apply to iBear program, Marshall iBear program, and they find it very fascinating. I haven't really researched into that program a lot, but a lot of our candidates really apply to that. So you may want to explore these programs unless, yeah, Lauren, if you want to add a few points.
I actually worked, I have a few clients that have a little bit more work experience, to be fair. So they definitely looked into the ones you mentioned. MSX, which is a little bit more tech, to be fair, but like in Stanford is a good one. MIT fellow, which also is kind of techish, but you know, it also can work. And then iBear is really popular, and I think it's very international focus, which is a very good benefit. Like they very much tout the fact that everyone's international, so that's helpful. And I would also add that, you know, maybe like the one-year MBA programs, those also, you know, because you can usually write into your essay, like one reason I wanted a one-year MBA program is because like, you know, faster, I already have like a lot of work experience. What I really just need to do is to jump back into the career or whatever. So I think those tend to be good ones. Otherwise, EMBAs as well.
Yeah. All right. So if you guys don't have any more questions, then I think we're done. Thanks a lot, Lauren and Kostub, for such an insightful session. It was great hosting both of you. I hope you guys found the value that you were looking for. I see all of you stuck around till the end. Thanks for being a great audience, and thanks for asking such great questions. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a nice evening wherever you are. Bye.
Take care.